I know him. Rock and roll has long been an instrument of rebellion. And tonight I want to tell a period piece about how I used rock and roll for rebellion. Now I've got to set the period first. It was the 1970s. And for a lot of you, I know some people here, this will all make sense, but for some of the younger people here, you will think I'm reading the script of a horror story. In the 1970s, there was only one television in the house. It had 8 channels. 9 if you were adept with rabbit ears. There was no wireless. There were no devices you could walk out of the room with and watch something else. You either watched what was on TV or you didn't watch TV at all. Now, I grew up in a house with 6 siblings, right? There were 7 of us total. And fitting in was the first step, right? When you're a kid, when you're an infant, really, you're trying to figure out the world. When you're a kid, you're trying to fit into the world. But when you're a teenager, you're trying to separate yourself a little bit. You're trying to find those things that make you, you, and not everybody else, right? And in a family of 7 kids, that was hard to do because all the good things were being taken before I got there, right? But I decided rock and roll would be my instrument because, well, there's only 7 channels on TV. You couldn't go there, right? So I had to find the thing. Now, in my house, we had some Beatles albums, and we had some Joni Mitchell albums. I had older sisters. We had some Simon and Garfunkel. That's probably the whole library we had of things to listen to. And I wanted to do something different, and I didn't know what. But I wanted it to be different. And one day after school, a friend of mine said, Sam Paparo, he said, hey, come to my house. My dad got a new album. And I thought there's potential in this, and I'll tell you why. Because A, his dad wore blue jeans, and B, his dad had a motorcycle. And in my experience, dads wore slacks and had station wagons. So this was cool, right? So I said, yeah, I'll go. We're walking. He said, it's by a guy named David Bowie. And I thought, this has got to work. And I'll tell you why I thought this has got to work. I had a cousin named Johnny who lived in Northeast Philly. And he was a rebel, if ever I knew a rebel. And he was cool. And he was older. And he was so cool that we were not allowed in his room when we visited. But when we passed by one time, I saw on the wall of his room a poster. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And I knew that was a David Bowie album. And I'm thinking, all right, if David Bowie is cool enough for Johnny, and Sam wants me to listen to a David Bowie album, this is my ticket, right? So we went to his house and we listened to an album called Heroes. And I will tell you it's mostly forgettable, or I forgot most of it anyway. That could just be my parent age speaking. But I remember the song Heroes, but you know, it didn't do anything for me. I wasn't going to sign on for rebellion, I didn't think, with David Bowie. Now back to the period piece and back to the family room with the one TV, right? All 9 of us were sitting in the room to watch the same TV show, and it was a Rock and Roll Music Awards. I think it was called the American Music Awards back in the day. It's 1977. And, you know, there was 2 parents on the sofa, a couple more kids, all the kids on the floor, chairs. There was a big bowl of popcorn passing around. There was Orange Crush soda, all you could drink, right? And we're watching this show together, and the announcer said, next up, David Bowie. And all my older siblings said, no, Dad, turn it off, quick, turn it off. And they were looking at my little sisters like something very bad was about to happen. And you could see the panic on my father's face, like, I bet I better get those rabbit ears going. Like, he was jumping up because he thought this was bad. And I heard my own little voice squeak, I like David Bowie. And I did that thing that kids are so good at doing to their parents. I put him in a no-win situation, right? Because someone had to be upset with the outcome now. The big ones wanted it off, I wanted it on. And I think the thing that swung it in my favor is my older brother started making fun of me for saying I like David Bowie, right? And my dad saw me getting picked on, he said, you know what? We said we'd watch it. And I had like a commercial and a half to revel in this moment. And this was my moment, and I had rebelled, and we were going to watch it, and I was going to get to see David Bowie, and I was thinking how cool my cousin Johnny was, and I was going to be just like him, and this was awesome. And all this was going through my head, and then the show came back on, and they said, and now, David Bowie. And he walked onto the stage, and the camera panned out, and he was wearing a 3/4 length dress. And he had glam makeup all over his eyes. And my dad's looking at my siblings like, you tried to warn me. And he's looking at me like, you like David Bowie? And I was like, what the hell did I do? I wanted a little bit of separation. I got my whole family questioning my sexuality, and I didn't even know my sexuality yet. This was wrong on so many levels. And while I'm thinking of all the trauma that will be associated with this, how it will not be cool, and how someday I will invite a prom date over, and my brothers will say, who's that guy in the dress you like? You know, and all this stuff that's going to happen to me, something even more amazing happened. David Bowie started playing the song Space Oddity. He started that countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, right? And everyone in the room shut up and listened to this really awesome song. And there was not another word spoken. I'm thinking, yeah, I liked David Bowie before that. I saved my newspaper money. The first album I ever bought was The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And to this day, it is one of my favorite albums. And yes, it's because the music's good, but probably more importantly, it was the first time I pushed out of my envelope a little bit, and it worked. Thank you.